You can call me Zelda. That's what I've been called my whole life. Zelda Sayre, born July 24th, 1900 in Montgomery, Alabama, and then later, Zelda Fitzgerald. The it couple. Yes. So you want to know a little bit about my life? My life is something else. Something else. Like I said, I was born in Montgomery, Alabama. I was the baby of 6 children. Some say I was spoiled. I say I was full of life. I wanted to live life to the fullest. And I gave it a try. Some people can't say that. I gave it a try. Some say my mother spoiled me. But how can you say I'm spoiled when Daddy was a Supreme Court judge of Alabama, and he was strict. He was a tight man. If I was more than 2 minutes late for dinner, he was going to have something to say about it. But I love my daddy. Don't get me wrong, I love my daddy. My daddy would provide a way of saving me from so much trouble. If it weren't for Daddy, that community would have had nothing to do with me for a long time. So I guess you could say that I didn't care much for school. I was more interested in socializing. I always kept a journal. Always, always, always. First it was a diary, then it was a journal, and then later on in my life, we call it a novel. Cheers. So anyway, to get back to my life, here I am in Montgomery, Alabama. I've got plenty of suitors. But to tell you the truth, it was getting a little boring. Those Montgomery boys were children. Children! So imagine my surprise when Mama had begged me to dance at the country club. She loved when I was on stage. And so I hadn't intended to go there at all. I was hoping to drink gin with some of the boys down at the City Hall dance, which Dad forbid me to go to, I might add. Anyways, I went to this country club dance, and it was a night that changed my life. At that country club, I met a handsome, and I do mean handsome man named F. Scott Fitzgerald. He was entranced for me right from the beginning. I thought he was handsome. But you know what sold me more than his incredible looks? He told me within 5 minutes of meeting him that he was going to be a famous writer someday. I loved the idea of a famous writer. I'd like to be a famous writer myself. He told me that he was going to take me away from Montgomery, and God, I could hardly stand it for waiting. We had fun right from the beginning. We were wild. My family didn't approve of him. You see, Scott drank a little too much. I drank, don't get me wrong, I drank plenty. But in the beginning, Scott drank more than I did. Anyway, Scott proposed to me. We met in 1918, and it didn't take long. I told him, as soon as you publish your first novel, I will marry you, Scott Fitzgerald. True to his word. He sent me his mother's wedding ring as soon as that first book, This Side of Paradise, was published. And it was published in March. In April, I was on a train to New York City. New York City. This little girl from Montgomery, Alabama. And before I knew it, we were married in a small wedding in New York City. And guess where Scott, guess where Scott took us? Where we were going to live. We lived in the Biltmore Estate in New York City. It wasn't really the Biltmore Estate. It was the Biltmore Hotel. My memory's getting bad. Of course it wasn't the Biltmore Estate. Anyways, it was the Biltmore Hotel. I don't know whether you've ever seen pictures of what the Biltmore Hotel looked like, but it wasn't shabby. It was lush and picturesque, and right there in New York City there was so much to do. But guess what we did? We drank. We drank gin. We drank. Scott even got us his own bootlegger. And my husband, I think he wanted me to be his muse, to tell you the truth. But I didn't want to be anybody's muse. I wanted to be somebody. I wanted to live life. Yes, sure I did. But I wanted to be somebody myself. I wanted to write. I wanted to paint. I wanted to do something that I did. That didn't seem to be happening, though. We married in 1908. We met in 1918, married in 1920, and in 1921 we had our first and only daughter, Scotty. We called her Scotty. She was a beautiful thing. I said to Scotty, I hope she'll be a beautiful little fool. She was adorable. But I have to confess, I wasn't really much for housekeeping. I certainly didn't win any awards being the mother of the year. I love Scotty, don't get me wrong. But I was filled with this need to do something for myself. It just didn't seem like it was coming. We were drinking and our parties. We got kicked out of the Biltmore Hotel. We got kicked out of another hotel. We were always at the best because Scott had published his novel and had made good money and continued writing stories. We lived well. I had beautiful clothes. I can't tell you how beautiful my clothes were. But things were starting to get on my nerves a little. Scott was getting drunk every damn night. And I drank. I drank so much it probably caused myself damage with that damn absinthe. Yes, I drank. I can't blame it all on Scott. But the drinking was getting out of hand. And Scott said he had to write his book. So I said we had to do something different. So it wasn't long before we ended up going. I think it was 1924. We burned a lot of bridges in New York. Of course, we got a lot of publicity, too. You should see, we were on the covers of every magazine and newspaper. They called us the It Couple. But it was getting old. It was getting quite old. And Scott said he had to write. So we rented a house. We went to the country. I've never been so bored in my life. It was more boring than Montgomery. Scott was writing every day. I had a baby. Fortunately, he hired a nurse and a houseboy to take care of everything because, like I said, I never made claims to be a homemaker. I never knew how to do anything. Nor did I care to, if you want to know the truth. Who wants to cook and clean? Not me. I was bored to tears. And it wasn't long before I was inviting our friends to come back. Come to the country, rescue me, please. Scott thought since we had a place in the water, and I loved swimming, that would be the place where I'd be happy. But how can I be happy not doing anything? So that didn't work out well. I remember one time when Mama and Daddy came to visit. It was horrifying. Truly, truly horrifying. I was embarrassed, and I don't embarrass. I was embarrassed. Our houseboy took Mama up to the bedroom, and they heard two one of our friends and his significant other naked as jaybirds on the bed. Mama about fainted. Daddy was uptight, uptight, uptight. They never even spent the night, it was so bad. We tried to have a dinner, but Scott blew that by being drunk. Well, it didn't work out. Scott was still wanting to write. And I kept, as you know, I kept my journal the whole time. So we ended up going to Paris. I love Paris. Paris is just as wonderful as New York. There was a lot to do. We were the it couple again. Expatriates. There was a lot. That's where Scott met. He met Hemingway. All kinds of famous people. And again, the partying continued. But I told you, I wanted something else. I wanted something that was mine. And I started taking ballet lessons from a professional. And I had a hard time. A very hard time. I was killing myself. I would work 8 hours a day. 8 hours a day. Ballet. And then Scott would want me to go out and drink with him. Have you ever tried exercising 8 hours a day and then going out drinking? It wasn't pretty. It was not pretty. Of course, there was a short little affair in Paris as well. Scott never forgave me for. What did he expect? He was drunk all the time and hanging out with a Hemingway that I really didn't care for. He didn't care for me either. Anyways, I was involved with ballet. 8 hours a day. I would get up, come rain or shine, and I was there. And I loved my teacher. I brought her flowers every day. And I was exhausting myself, though. I was only getting 4 hours of sleep a night. So I finally got invited. It was 1929, and I was invited, a real honor, to the ballet school of San Carlo Opera Ballet in Naples. Me! It was an accomplishment. And I could have been professional, even though I was so late. I would never be the best. That bothered me, because I didn't start early enough. I could never be the best. But I could be a professional. But I turned it down. Scott didn't want me to go. Tell you the truth, Scott didn't want me to do anything except be his muse. By this time, it had become quite obvious to me that Scott was borrowing liberally from my journals. I brought it to him one day and said, "My dear, I do believe that these are my words that you've used in this novel." "Yes, dear." As if it was nothing. It was my words. My words. I can't blame it all on him. We were in it together. But why he wanted to keep me from being accomplished, I don't know. It was his own insecurity. I do know it was his own insecurity. And he used my words. But that's water under the bridge, isn't it? It wasn't long before I was hospitalized. I was so exhausted. I'd reached my goal. I was accepted. I could have been a contender, as they say, but I turned it down. And it was shortly after that I was hospitalized and in a psychiatric facility. I was in bad shape. I never knew my diagnosis. Scott did. He told the doctors everything. I didn't. I was anxious. I was starting to see the trees around the hospital spooky. My senses were distorted. Smells. I smelled. Things were not right. I needed to recover and rest and be without Scott and be without drinking. Sure enough, just like I expected, the doctor said I could never drink again. Me, I could never drink again. Scott's going to love that, I thought. Well, cheers. I was in that hospital for over a year. It was quite a surprise. Well, I moved from that hospital, actually, to Switzerland. A hospital in Switzerland. I hated that first doctor. He was always saying what Scott said, telling him what I should do and what I shouldn't do. That wasn't helping me, now was it? So I went to Switzerland. Eventually, I got out. A year. It took a year. And Scott and I went and lived in Montgomery, Alabama. Can you believe that? It was actually kind of comforting. And while I was there, Scott and I and little Scotty in Montgomery, Alabama, Scott decides to take off to Hollywood because he has to make money. So he leaves me in Montgomery, where my father's dying. Now, I told you I love my daddy. My daddy was as strict as they come, but I loved my daddy. And it was a tough time for me, and I was lonely. And I started deteriorating again. I wanted so much to have something of my very own. It seemed like it was never going to come. When Scott came back for Christmas that year, I was not in good shape. I said, I need to go back to the hospital. This time it was Maryland. Yep, I went to Johns Hopkins in Maryland. And this time, I wrote my own damn novel. I did. Save Me the Waltz. I wrote that book in 2 months. Some say it wasn't the best. I was disappointed by the sales, but I wrote my own damn novel. Can you imagine how furious Scott was? He was furious. You know what it did? He came marching up there and demanded that I take this out and that out. I did, because he had planned on using it in his novel, Tender is the Night. Again, all about us. It was supposed to be my biography, my autobiography, not his. Anyways, I did. I wrote, and I published. And he was so damn mad when I sent that straight to the publisher, so he couldn't stop it. I did it. But I can't say things were better after that. We tried. Scott was a raging alcoholic. He wasn't going to change. He blamed me. He felt he was all washed up because of me. Our run was short. That it couple, we were done. It was unfortunate. Scott would have said it was tragic. So you want to know about me and my mental illness? I think that's why you wanted to talk to me in the first place. I'm sorry, I do digress sometimes. What I say about my mental illness, they still can't decide. Some say I'm schizophrenic. And quite frankly, those sensory experiences I was having, they might be right. Others say that I had manic depression, just called bipolar these days. Whatever it was. I think, if you really want to know, I think I was a tortured soul. I think I was tortured that I had so much within me that I wanted to express, and that I ended up with a man that I loved so very, very dearly that didn't want me to express myself. So am I blaming it on Scott? Not completely. I was a willing partner. I loved that man. I loved that man with all my heart. Just like he loved me. We adored each other. But I do think the crux of my mental illness was being a tortured soul, wanting to express myself and being stifled in every way. I ended up back in the mental institution. I even died in a mental institution. Yes, yes. I was in a mental institution for the rest of my life, off and on. I'd come out and go back in. I even started painting. Some say my paintings were good. They say that I had been influenced by Van Gogh and by Georgia O'Keeffe. I don't know. They were mine. It was my paintings. It was another way. I was disappointed not to write. I always continued keeping my journals. How did my mental illness impact my life? Terribly! Terribly! Just imagine what I could have done if I wasn't so tortured. So what can I say? I can say, the part is over. You can still call me Zelda.